Yes, hopefully you all heard that. Big Brother is watching. So if you have any problems with being recorded, please turn your video off, or yeah, hopefully that's okay with everyone. But this is going to be recorded, so we're hoping that we can post this video on YouTube at some point, so that everyone who wasn't here can watch it. Does anyone have like an idea of what's going on with the waiting room? Oh, there's no one in there. Okay, cool.
I've just been admitting some people.
Okay, sweet.
Ella?
What the hell? Oh, no. Oh, shit. Yes?
Sorry, are we just going to go in order of all of the slides?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I think you're at the end.
Yeah. Okay.
But it will just be, your, the slides that have your name on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it is just the normal order.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Hello everyone who's joining currently. Thank you. Okay, should we just start now? Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Welcome to this meeting. Just to note, this meeting is going to be slightly different to what the future meetings will be like, just in the sense that this is still a very new thing, so everything's still sort of getting ironed out, and we're still figuring out exactly who we are and what the plan is. So it's not going to be the most interactive meeting, just because we were going to do a Q&A, but I think we decided that we need to figure out where we stand on a few things and what's actually happening before we can start taking a lot of questions. So yeah, hopefully this can just be a bit of an opportunity to kind of like lay out some of the plans, and yeah, go through some of the research that a lot of you guys have collectively done, and then hopefully in future meetings we'll have a bit more of an interactive kind of structure. Cool. Okay, so I'm gonna just introduce to you guys some core members of the team. So yeah, might as well just go straight into it. So Kane, do you want to start?
Yeah, my name is Kane Lewin-Turner. I'm based in Bristol and Brighton. I guess my main function is to kind of provide a historical perspective and give some guidance on our strategy and our output.
I'm Sonia. I'm based in Brighton, and my interest is more so in providing support and resources for mental health issues and at-risk youth.
Cool. Ellis, your microphone's off.
Yeah, I'm Ellis. I'm based in Manchester, originally from Brighton though, and I think my main speciality is in health inequalities. Yeah.
Sweet.
Hi, my name's Jasmine. I'm based between Birmingham and Bristol, and in terms of what I'm going to be doing, I'm sort of interested in barriers to employment for people of colour, and I'll be helping out with some of the social media strategy as well.
Cool. I actually don't know if Lenny, are you here? No, I don't think he's here. Okay, we'll move on to you, Olivia. Hello, I'm Olivia. I'm Ella's twin sister, as you may be able to tell. I am based in Brighton. My main sort of area of interest is education, because I've just qualified as a PE teacher. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gabriel. I'm based in London, originally from Texas, and my area of interest is social policy research, and specifically education.
Yes.
Hi, I'm G. I'm based in London, and my main area of interest is like the creative side, storytelling through different mediums. So yeah.
Cool. And Amar.
Hi guys, my name is Amar. I'm based in London, and my main interest is history and trying to change the curriculum in the UK to represent a more wider and truthful history of our past.
Thank you. I think there are a few other members of the kind of Angry Mob core team that are not here right now, so we'll just move on. But Lily, if you could just unmute yourself and just explain yourself as well.
Hi, I don't know if my camera is working. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm Lily, and I am the intersectionality officer because my interest lies in seeing the intersections between all the different systems of oppression and always recognizing those different overlaps.
Sweet, thank you. Oh yeah, well we're going to explain that in a minute, but sorry. So yeah, well the Angry Mob, we'll explain in a sec, but basically is just a way to kind of ensure that within the AIR Collective, like the voices of like people of colour and non-white people are kind of like amplified and sort of prioritised in terms of the decision making processes and things like that. So that's kind of why we started we're having weekly meetings on Wednesdays with this group, but I will kind of leave it to Kane to explain a bit more about that now.
Okay, cool. So just to provide especially for those who are new, to provide some insight into who we are and what we do. So AIR UK is a grassroots anti-racist collective run by people of colour, or the global majority, aiming to breathe new life into the fight against institutional and systemic racism. We aim to provide a radical inquiry into the contours of institutional racism, which will in turn constitute a well-informed and well-rounded counter to it. Our approach rejects essentialism as well as non-intersectional methods which litter anti-racist circles by recognising both the discursiveness of race and the need for anti-racist formations that are all-encompassing. AIR UK's core team is affectionately and indeed accurately known as the Angry Mob, who meet and strategize weekly and then engage with and are supported on a bi-weekly basis by our wonderful and diverse group of allies, all of you. But yeah, I think that's a good kind of overview of who we are and what we're trying to do. But I will hand over to Gabe to give some additional information on our research.
Thank you. So at our research stage, we're focused on carrying out our own research on how institutional racism experienced through different communities and how it's upheld in different structures. So we're going to look at the law enforcement systems, criminal justice, education, media, healthcare, mental health, social work, housing, and the multiple other systems that there are. This research will help us to identify where there could be policy reform when needed and come up with specific demands that are backed by data and evidence so we can produce the strongest possible campaigns. And then I'll hand off to Georgie to tell us about the creative intersects.
Thanks. So one thing that we think will really help create a bigger impact is to bridge the gap between creativity and political activism. We think this is a way that will bring people together of all different backgrounds. Unfortunately, today we see way too many cases of big businesses and corporations that are more than happy to profit from Black talent, but they don't put the time or the energy into nurturing, protecting, promoting that talent and their work. So as part of our research, we'll explore storytelling through art, music, poetry, other mediums, and act as a platform to help people of colour to share, advocate, and promote. Over to you, Jazz. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, technical difficulty. I was on mute. So a bit about why we're doing this now. It felt really important to start this group now, not simply as a reaction just to the Black Lives Matter movement, which has obviously been going on, but as a way to mobilise all of those that have been inspired by it and to commit to dismantling the racist system in the UK on a longer term basis. It also feels like there is space for us. There's no other organisation in this country that
I think we may have
all of the different branches of anti-institutional racism we're trying to do.
We slightly lost your connection there, Jazz. I think you paused, but then we heard most of, yeah, we heard what you said, I think.
Okay.
I think.
All right, that's fine. Well, Olivia, on to the next bit.
Thanks, Jazz. Yeah, so what we're not trying to do is reinvent the wheel. We want to promote effective and vigorous pro-equality activism, which already exists within the UK. We plan to work strategically with like-minded groups who are already influential in the field that we're entering to support them and create a strong, united front. Over to you, Ellis. Ellis, where are you at? Are you there? If you're there, we can't hear you or see you, so maybe she's not there. Okay, maybe I might have to say Ellis a bit. Go on. Okay, well, Ellis is amazing, and I don't actually. Did she? She didn't introduce herself, did she? So maybe she wasn't here. Anyway,
she did introduce herself. I just don't know.
You did.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, I must have missed that. Okay. Well, anyway, well, hopefully she'll come back. But Ellis is an amazing person. She's Kane's sister also. But I'll just read out the bit that she wanted to say. So we basically agreed as a collective that intersectionality, inclusion and accessibility are integral to our ethics and will shape everything we do. So we're trying to formulate a code of conduct at the moment, which will ensure like diversity and representation across things like age, disability, mental health, LGBTQI+, and other factors, which also intersect with systemic racism. And we want to amplify the voices of people who are affected by multiple marginalisation, so like marginalised in different ways in their lives. And we want to make our material as accessible as possible for those with, for example, vision, hearing or mobility impairments, or those whose first language isn't English, those who don't have access to the internet, and those who are like neurodiverse and things like that. So we don't just want to do like a completely online campaign or whatever. Like we're hoping to kind of expand it to offline means as well. Yeah, cool. So I think that's basically the kind of mission statement broken down by different people. And just a couple of updates basically on like since the last meeting. I'll keep this very brief, but we've applied for some funding, but we're going to obviously wait and see if we do get that or not before we kind of give any more updates on that. But yeah, we have applied for some funding, so hopefully if we do get that, then there'll be ways that we can break that down in terms of like campaign materials, and then also maybe supporting like community projects and things like that as well. Social media, you guys have probably noticed like there's been some presence on Instagram. At the moment, like we're just trying to kind of like gain a little bit of a following and kind of fill out the page with people's stories about and people's thoughts and opinions about institutional racism, and like translate that through photography mainly at the moment. But yeah, we're kind of formulating a bit of a social media plan as well. We've actually got a new recruit for the Angry Mob called Kanja, who is not here at the moment unfortunately, but he's going to be kind of like leading that side of things hopefully, and hopefully we'll have some more updates on that kind of more solid social media kind of plan at the next meeting. And then also, we're kind of talking to a research agency at the moment, or we're planning on kind of having some more detailed conversations with a research agency who hopefully will be able to facilitate us doing some more like kind of targeted and detailed like research, which we can then use to form some kind of report. I mean, obviously this will come in kind of waves and around different topics in different areas of the country and things like that, but we're hoping that we're going to make some connections with some research agencies who can help us carry out research which will then inform some of our future campaigning. So yes, that's kind of the updates that we have for this week. And now I think we're just going to go into oh yeah, cool. So we're going to go into the presentation now. So for those of you who were at the last meeting, which I think quite a few of you were, a lot of you have like been really amazingly doing some like detailed in-depth research about racism in policing and law enforcement. So yeah, last time we kind of like sent everyone off to do a bit of like individual research each, and that's all been put into a PowerPoint, which we're going to present now. We're just going to kind of skim over it. So thank you so much to everyone who has kind of contributed like some really in-depth research, and we're hoping that this is going to be like a resource that we can all use. We're going to make it public, so hopefully we'll just put it on the Instagram bio for now. So we'll make the document public so that then everyone who's here, you can go through it in a bit more depth and read it and use it, yeah, as a resource. But for now, we're just going to kind of go over the key bits, and hopefully the idea of doing this is that we collectively can come up with some ideas by looking at kind of like the current situation in racism in policing. We can come up with some ideas about what could potentially be changed. So if you could just, while we're going through the presentation, if you have any ideas that kind of jump out at you that you think, oh, specifically like this, you know, the police could do this, or we could ask the government to change this about law enforcement, just make a note of them, and then we're gonna I think we're gonna post a Google Doc at the end of this presentation that you can just add any of your ideas into, and then hopefully we can kind of go through those ideas a little bit later down the line as we kind of go further with our campaigning. So yeah, that's the idea of this presentation now, I think. Yeah, and I will start presenting my screen in a sec. Just one thing to note, it's kind of like a trigger warning or a content warning. The first 20 minutes or so of this presentation are going to be quite upsetting, and quite like the first 20 minutes are basically about cases of police brutality and people who have been killed by the police in the UK. So if that's something that would be like very like upsetting and traumatic for you, then like I would suggest just like having, you know, going and grabbing a drink or just like chilling for 20 minutes and then coming back, just because it's going to be quite tough to read about, but then I think important to learn about as well. So cool. Okay, we'll go into it now. I'm going to share my screen. How do you, oh god, okay, sorry guys, yeah, hold on. Button that says present somewhere. Yeah, oh here we go, sorry. Right. Okay, so we're going to take it, we've got like 4 of us, I think, no, 5 of us who are going to do like sections each. So me and Olivia are going to start off with the first section, and then we'll move on to the second half of the presentation is going to be a little bit more like positive and uplifting. But yeah, cool. Can you all see the screen? Just give me a nod. Yeah, thank you. Cheers. Again, thank you so much to everyone who wrote these slides. So the first case which I'm going to talk about is a young man called Nuno Cardoso. He was a 25-year-old law student who died in November 2017. The police were called to an altercation at Ruskin College between him and another student. He was visibly intoxicated and refused to speak, and clearly had something in his mouth, and the police officers were aware that he had something in his mouth. He was then taken to a police station and not to a hospital, which was actually what the guidance was if someone was suspected of packing drugs. But he was taken straight to the police station, and during the journey he was seen chewing something and then sweating, and he then collapsed. An ambulance was called, but unfortunately he died in hospital later that day. The police who were involved were found to have not followed the guidance, as I mentioned, and their sergeant told them that they could confer with each other before they gave any sort of reports on what happened. So that also went against guidance. However, there was no justice. None of the police officers were found to have none of them were sacked or had any disciplinary action taken against them. But as you can see on this slide, there were some policy recommendations from the IOPC. We're going to talk about what the IOPC is a little bit later in this presentation. So again, sorry to skip over that, but please read the information if you want to know a bit more. The next person is Julian Cole. This happened in Bedfordshire. He was 19 in 2013. He was trying to get back into a nightclub. Security called the police. 3 police officers turned up and cuffed him face down. They then dragged him into a police van and took him to the police station. He couldn't even stand up when he arrived at the police station. He was later found to have a broken vertebrae. All 3 officers were found to have lied in their accounts of what happened with Julian Cole, and they were all sacked for misconduct. However, no arrests have been made, and Julian Cole remains completely paralysed and requiring 24-hour care now at the age of 25, tragically. The next case is Leon Briggs, quite a highly publicised case, I believe. He also died in 2013, also in Bedfordshire. He was arrested under the Mental Health Act and taken to a police cell where he was restrained until he became unresponsive. The post-mortem, however, was inconclusive, basically didn't highlight the fact that he was restrained so brutally. The IOPC said that the case collapsed because there was no evidence produced by Bedfordshire police against their officers. So there's been sort of back and forth with the IOPC about misconduct, but eventually the misconduct hearings were withdrawn, leaving Leon Briggs's family devastated and without justice. There is an inquest into his death, which is scheduled for 2021, which is obviously a long time after the incident has occurred. The next case is Senny Lewis. He was a 23-year-old man. This incident happened in 2010 in Peckham. His family took him to hospital as a voluntary vulnerable patient after 2 days of uncharacteristic behaviour. Literally, a few hours after he was admitted into hospital, he was restrained by 11 policemen who used batons and handcuffs, despite the fact that Senny was not being violent. He was resisting or struggling, but there was obviously no need to use batons or handcuffs, and he died 4 days after this restraint due to his brain being starved of oxygen. No, not yet, sorry. So the CPS said that there was insufficient evidence to bring charges against the police officers, and there was no misconduct hearing, no punishment, and again, no justice. And tragically, his last words were, "I can't breathe," which we all know the relevance of that sentence at the moment. Sorry, I'm just reading from my notes here. The next case was Rashawn Charles. Again, you may have heard of this case. 20-year-old man who died in 2017. An officer followed Rashawn into a shop after he left his car suspiciously. Rashawn, there is CCTV footage of this whole incident. Rashawn was walking away at the point when one police officer essentially tackled him to the ground. Rashawn had something in his mouth, and the police officer was heard to say to him, spit it out, but Rashawn was choking on this packet. The police officer was holding him down by his neck and trying to reach down his throat to pull this thing out, but Rashawn became motionless. However, after becoming motionless, he was still restrained by this police officer and a member of the public, I believe, for a further 5 minutes before he received any medical help. During the trial, sorry, he then obviously passed away. Oh, what just happened? Oh, right, sorry. He then passed away after receiving some CPR, but it was too late. The police officer and witnesses were given the right to remain anonymous throughout the trial, and I believe are still anonymous at this point. The jury returned a verdict of accidental death, and the officer was cleared of misconduct. But if you want to watch the video, it is very upsetting, but it's clear to see that his death was essentially caused by this police officer, in my opinion. But yeah, no misconduct was found. The next case is Shane Bryant. He was 29 years old and died in 2017 after being restrained by members of the public, one of whom was a off-duty police officer. He was suspected of carrying out a robbery at a co-op, and him and another person were fleeing the scene at the point which they were apprehended by members of the public. The incident was not caught on camera, and so it's kind of unexplained what happened, but clearly he was a healthy man, and he basically died after this restraint from members of the public. The post-mortem said that the death was unexplained. A 24-year-old member of the public who was suspected of having kicked Shane in the head during this restraint was arrested for GBH, but was later released. So again, Shane's family have been left with no answers and no justice. Sean Rigg, we actually saw someone at the Brighton Black Lives Matter protest who had a banner for his cousin, who was Sean Rigg. He was 40 years old and he died in Brixton in 2008. He was living in a hostel for people with forensic mental health issues, a history of forensic mental health, and the police were called, I think 5 times, and they didn't respond until 3 hours later, at which point 4 officers restrained Sean for 8 minutes. He was then taken in a police van and left alone in the van for 10 minutes whilst visibly extremely unwell. He was then taken to a police station and left on the floor, handcuffed and unresponsive, for 25 minutes. One of the police officers was heard saying that he was faking it, and he sort of tried to stop him from getting any medical help. But it was then realised that he wasn't breathing and his heart had stopped. There's been sort of several hearings about this which have then been dropped or put back, but essentially in 2019 an investigation by the IOPC cleared all 5 police officers of misconduct in this case. I've just got one more to do. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So this case is different in the sense that it's not about brutality, thankfully, but Carol Howard was one of only 2 black women out of 400 armed Met Police in the Diplomatic Defence Group. She basically made a claim of discrimination and oppression against an inspector that she worked with called David Kelly. During the tribunal against him, the Met Police actually arrested Carol Howard 6 times, and one of the times was, all of the times were leaked to the press. And one of the times was accusing her of distributing child pornography, which actually turned out to be just her sending a picture of her own child sleeping to her ex-husband. So basically there was a massive smear campaign against her. But she did eventually get, I think it was £37,000 as a result of the tribunal. And it was found that David Kelly undermined, discredited and belittled Carol Howard. However, there was no action taken against him other than that he was put on some training. I'm not sure who did this slide, but it's really informative because, as you can see, it's basically massively discouraging for anyone else who wants to make any sort of claims of discrimination. And 33% of black or minority ethnic people have experienced workplace discrimination, but only 0.01% have made a claim. And you can see why when you get results like this, I think. Yeah. So that's the end of my slides. Thank you again so much to everyone who wrote those slides. I think that there was some really important information on there. Yeah, I agree. Thanks. I'm going to take a move on. I'm going to just do some more. Unfortunately, some more sad cases of racism, basically within law enforcement. But but yeah, I know it's quite intense listening to all of this, but I think that if, as I said before, like if this kind of, if there are any ideas that jump out of you of how we can like prevent, come up with a campaign that prevents these kind of things from happening again, then please make a note of them, and then we can hopefully bring something constructive out of this research. So Kingsley Burrell, he died in 2011. He made calls to emergency services, which resulted in him being detained in a mental health unit. Which is quite telling in itself. The police were called out to the unit, and he sustained a head injury after a prolonged struggle with them. He was then taken to hospital and put in a seclusion room with a sheet over his head, and he died of a cardiac arrest the next day. There was an official inquiry into his death, in which PC Paul AD was cleared of using excessive force, but he was later dismissed for gross misconduct. This seems to be quite a common theme where police officers are fired, but they're not actually kind of convicted, which doesn't make any sense in my mind. But yeah, and then in 2015 there was an inquest jury that ruled prolonged restraint and failure to provide basic medical attention had been factors in his death. And in 2017, the three officers involved were cleared of perjury and perverting the course of justice. Okay, yeah, so Christopher Alder, this is quite a famous case. This happened in 1998, where he was punched in a nightclub and then arrested for apparently becoming aggressive at the hospital, but he later died on the floor of a police station in Hull, where he lay dying for 11 minutes, surrounded by police officers. An inquest returned a verdict of unlawful killing. 5 police officers were put on trial, but the case collapsed and all of the officers were cleared in the end. A 2006 report accused the officers present of the same unwitting racism that was uncovered in the Stephen Lawrence case by the McPherson report. The 4 officers involved were then granted early retirement with payouts of between 44 to 66 grand each. Then, yeah, in 2011, Christopher's family actually took this case to the European Court of Human Rights, and this resulted in the government publicly apologising for breaching Christopher's right to life, right not to be tortured and treated inhumanely, and right not to be discriminated against. That was actually quite a groundbreaking thing to happen. Well, not that it means anything, just the government apologising, but that was the first time that something like that had happened as a result of a case being taken to the European Court of Human Rights. But yeah, nevertheless, obviously Christopher's family have suffered massively, not only due to his death, but also the mix-up with his body, police surveillance, and a lack of justice and accountability at almost every turn in this case. The case of Joy Gardner, this is not so well known, I don't think, but yeah, it happened in 1993. She was a Jamaican mature student living in London who died after being detained by police during an immigration raid on her home. She was detained with handcuffs, straps and gagged with adhesive tape wrapped around her head. Unable to breathe, she collapsed and suffered brain damage due to asphyxia. And yeah, she was placed on life support after that, but died of a cardiac arrest 4 days after the incident. And in 1995, 3 of the police officers involved stood a trial for manslaughter, but were acquitted, of course. And despite continuing pressure by campaigners, there's been no inquest or inquiry into the circumstances of her death. Habib Ullah was 39 when he suffered a cardiac arrest whilst being restrained by the High Wycombe police during a search. He was pronounced dead in hospital. This was in 2008. The officers reported that they noticed a lump in his cheek where they believed he was concealing drugs. Witnesses said that they held Habib face down on the ground with their hands around his throat and putting their hands in his mouth. Under oath in 2010, the police officers admitted removing potentially key evidence from their statements, leading to the 2010 inquest being abandoned and a new investigation launching. So again, this is a case of police officers covering up and lying. 5 officers were later cleared of gross misconduct following alleged breaches involving altering their statements. The CPS also decided against proceeding with any charges in this case. and the Thames Valley Police were cleared of any wrongdoing in connection with the death in the end. But they did receive a compensation claim from Habib's widow, and they offered her a settlement, which she has accepted. This is the case of Anthony Granger. I know a lot of these slides have a lot of information in them, but yeah, we're just kind of going through the main points here, and then if you want to read into it in more depth, then you'll be able to access these slides as well. But yeah, Anthony Granger, he was a white man. He was unarmed when he was shot and killed in 2012 while sitting in a stolen Audi with 2 other occupants. The police had been surveying him on suspicion of criminal activity. And in 2016, Theresa May basically announced that the inquest into Granger's death would be converted into a public inquiry, which means that it has greater investigative and legal powers and enables all of the relevant evidence, including confidential police documents that would have previously been deemed too sensitive, to be considered. So the inquiry issued a report last year in 2019, which blamed the police for the shooting and criticised the Manchester police force for serious deficiencies in its firearms unit. And this case was just kind of interesting because yeah, as it notes at the bottom, the police brutality and incompetence were again exercised against Anthony Granger regardless of his ethnicity. However, the media coverage and demand for justice was quite vast, and the police were in a sense held accountable for his execution. So this can be seen as a kind of demonstration of some white privilege in terms of how it was dealt with after the death, although it doesn't take away from the tragedy of the death itself. Daniel Adewole was aged 16 when he died in Cookham Child Prison. This was in 2015. He was the 34th child to die in that prison in custody since 1990. And he was the second boy to die at Cookham Wood, specifically since 2012. He was basically found unresponsive in his cell after an epileptic fit, and the coroner concluded that prison officers should have entered the cell much sooner. They waited for 38 minutes before they did anything, basically after they received no response at his cell door. Okay, yeah, and then Azelle Rodney. He was murdered in 2005 by a police officer called Anthony Long, who is kind of well known as being Britain's deadliest firearms officer. He previously killed 3 other people while serving the police force before he killed Azelle Rodney. The police have been following the 2 people that Azelle Rodney was in a car with for 2 days, believing that they picked up some machine guns. Anthony Long fired 8 fatal shots at Rodney, justifying this by saying that he believed Rodney was reaching for and preparing to shoot a machine gun. But the first investigation concluded that although Rodney was not holding a gun when shot, apparently the police officer had no option than to take the course of action that he did. But then in 2007, the coroner ruled a full inquest couldn't have been made because there were so many redactions in police evidence, basically. So this seems to be also a common theme where the police fuck up so many times that then somehow that means that the authorities just don't bother doing an inquest, which just doesn't really make any sense. But yeah, anyway. In 2009, Rodney's mother filed a case against the British government in the European Court of Human Rights over the fact that they'd failed to hold a reasonably prompt investigation into her son's death. And then, yeah, in 2013, a public inquiry concluded that the police officer had no lawful justification for killing Rodney. And in 2014, the inquiry brought new info to light. The CPS actually then charged Anthony Long with murder of Rodney, but Long was not found guilty of murder on a majority verdict. Okay, this is the last one. So this is the case of Simeon Francis. Yeah, he was found unresponsive in his cell at Torquay police station this year. This is very recent. So yeah, the cause of his death hasn't been established yet. We're waiting for this to be investigated by the police watchdog, and yeah, the IOPC will be focusing on the care that he was given whilst in custody, frequency and adequacy of the checks carried out on him while he was in police custody. And yeah, this is basically ongoing, but it's something that we can kind of keep an eye out on how that case is going. Yeah, so that concludes this section of the presentation. Just to say, like, there are some very prominent cases that are actually not in this presentation yet. That's just because this is a collective piece of research, and it's not been, like, there are some people who haven't quite had a chance to finish their research yet. So we're going to add some other pieces of information on this PowerPoint to come. Like, there's Mark Duggan, who is a very, very prominent case, which probably most of you have heard of, and yeah, so this isn't an exhaustive list of all of the people who have suffered at the hands of kind of racism in the police, but yeah, anyway. And apologies that we had to rush through the cases, which obviously we could do a whole presentation on each one, and I feel like it's, you know, we're not giving the people the respect that they deserve, but unfortunately this is how many cases that there have been, and that's the reality. Cool, so we're going to hand over to Jazz now, who's going to talk about the ethnicity pay gap.
Okay, yeah, so I'm just going to talk about the ethnicity pay gap for a little bit. Oh, can you hear me? It says my internet connection's unstable. Yeah,
yeah,
good.
we can hear you.
I can't see the presentation, so I'm just going to like ad lib. And then you can try and match the presentation to what I'm saying. Unfortunately, a long-standing phenomenon in the UK, and it's actually talking about how ethnic minorities on average earn less than their white counterparts. And as a result of this, ethnic minorities are twice as likely to experience poverty at some point in their life than their white counterparts, which is obviously indicative of the broader racial injustices and discrimination that we face in the UK. So in terms of this case study, was done within the Metropolitan Police. The Met has 37,527 employees, of which 6,349 are Black, Asian, and minority ethnic. Just a note on that, they've sort of lumped it all together as BAME. Obviously, there's a lot of disparities between how different ethnic minorities experience the ethnicity pay gap, but that's how they've just done this report. On average, BAME staff receive £2.05 less than an hour than the average white member of staff, which is a 9.67% mean pay gap. Also, all 37 officers on salaries of £100,000 and over are white. In terms of bonus payments, the proportion of white officers receiving bonus payments is 1.23% compared to 0.83% for BAME officers. Within the police report, the Met said that BAME employees who undertake the same role, have the same length of work, or the same hours, receive the same pay as white employees. And obviously that sort of points to more of an issue in terms of occupational segregation. It's not an issue of, you know, people that are ethnic. I mean, it is an issue to an extent, but it's more of an issue of ethnic minorities not having access to higher paid jobs, which brings down the average level of pay across BAME people, rather than people of ethnic minorities being paid differently for doing exactly the same job. But that is obviously a massive issue within our workforce. And then when we looked sort of further into the pay audit of London's public workers, which was done in 2018, sort of across all public services, BAME workers are paid on average up to 37% less than their white counterparts. So obviously there's two issues there, what I mentioned before in terms of occupational segregation, which is the overrepresentation of people of colour working in lower paid jobs, and issues of progression with ethnic minorities not being able to access sort of the higher paid jobs. And then the next slide is talking about the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which was a report done in 2017 about the ethnicity pay gap. Basically, what this report found was that on average, those of Pakistani, Bangladeshi, and Black African origin experience the highest rates of unemployment, lower occupational status, and lower earnings on average. And out of all of these groups, it is actually people of Bangladeshi origin that suffer the most. Male Bangladeshi immigrants have the largest pay gap compared to their white counterparts of 48%, which means that they earn on average around only half of what white British men earn. And for British-born Bangladeshi men, that is a 26% pay gap, which correlates to poverty rates. So the sort of average poverty rate for Bangladeshi groups is 50%, which is the highest out of all of the ethnic minorities that we have in Britain. And then going through this quickly, for Pakistani immigrant men, there's a 31% pay gap. For British-born Pakistani men, there's a 19% pay gap. For immigrant and British-born Black Caribbean men, the pay gaps are 17% and 7% respectively. For Black African immigrant men, there's a pay gap of 19%, while British-born and Black African men earn roughly the same as white British men. And sort of when you bring more intersectionality into this and look at women as well, it is interesting. Because Bangladeshi immigrants and Pakistani immigrants that are female experience around a 12% pay gap compared to white British women, but those of Indian and Chinese origin, actually there's a negligible pay gap. So it is important to think about intersectionality when we're looking at these pay gaps, because they do vary widely between different ethnic minorities. Yeah, so intersectionality. So while there is a definite pattern of disadvantage for all ethnic minorities when it comes to the ethnicity pay gap, but the experience is different. Look at something to keep in mind, reportation of ethnic prevention, and qualifications, which is the big one as well. In terms of poverty, the poverty rates for Bangladeshi groups, as I said earlier, is the highest, so it's 50%. For Black groups, it is 40%, 25% for Indian groups, and 20% for white British groups, and they're just averages. And in terms of actions that we can take, these are sort of broad things, but policy to limit wage discrimination is obviously the most important one. Analysis of recruitment processes and the broad sort of improvement of access to better paying occupations for ethnic minorities. The next slide we're going to talk about really quickly is the Equality Act of 2010, which is dealing with race discrimination in police law. So there's 4 ways of discrimination which are outlawed within the police force and recruitment into the police force. The first one of these is direct discrimination. So this includes when you've been treated less favourably because of your race or your perceived race or your parents' race. You must prove that you've been treated worse than a person not of that race, and this treatment gave you a disadvantage or had a negative impact on you. The second form of discrimination you can face is indirect discrimination. So when your selection criteria for a job puts people of a particular race at disadvantage, or if the selection criteria is not actually essential for a job. For example, motorcycle police officers might put Sikhs at a disadvantage because they will not wear a helmet due to wearing a turban. Number 3 is victimization, which is when you treat a person unfairly because they have lodged a complaint for racial discrimination or supplying information for racial discrimination or related to the case in whatever shape or form. And the 4th type of discrimination is harassment, which is if someone is being intimidating, hostile, degrading, or humiliating towards a person based on their race or ethnicity. The police have there's various stipulations that the police have put in this law, including positive action, which is where the police might actively select people based on the race or ethnicity if they feel that these people are sort of underrepresented or at a disadvantage in the recruitment process, which is also known as positive discrimination more widely. But also, if you are reporting any of these types of discrimination within the police force, there's a lot of stipulations around time limits and proof. So the case of discrimination must be brought forward in 3 months in spring if the incident has been
Okay, technical difficulties. Sorry, guys. That was just okay. Well, hopefully she'll come back, but that was basically the end of her slide there. Where did she get up to? She was just here, I think. Okay, yeah. I think she may have actually gone now. Jazz? Sorry about this. But yeah, so we got time limits improve and then remedies. I won't read it for her because I think I won't do her justice, but hopefully you guys have had a look at that. And we'll just move on to the next part of the presentation.
I'm sorry, I just got kicked out by my own Zoom.
Oh no! Oh yeah, I was wondering what happened. Yeah, sorry.
I don't know how far along I got. Yeah, basically finished that. I was just going to talk about the remedies. So if the case comes forward, there's basically three things that they can do, which is a declaration of the rights of both parties, a recommendation that the respondent takes a particular course of action, or compensation.
Thanks, Jazz. Okay, right. So we'll move on to who?
Me. Hello? Am I good? Okay. So I'm going to go over a few of the articles that were written in response to a few of the situations that went on. The first article is by Wael Kasim, and the main points of his was that he urges people to acknowledge the fact that police racism and forms of inherent racism are riddled through the UK and just not exclusive to the US. So he put some figures in here about how there's 1,741 people that were killed after police contact or being in police custody, and not a single one of the officers were convicted in these crimes, which we kind of saw with a few of the examples. He also mentioned how there were 74 people that have been fatally shot since 1990, 20 of them which have been a part of the BAME community, which shows that, like, proportionally, they're 2 times as likely to get shot by the police. He also breaks down how the police issue is oversimplified by the militarization of police, and that racism is the fueling, is the thing that fuels it, not the fact that they have these guns and other weapons. He says that, or he points out how George Floyd didn't die by the hands of any gun usage, no tasers or anything, but they still had the racism fueling the actions, which still led to his death. He says that the deaths that we see are the most extreme cases, and there's so much more going on behind the scenes that we're not seeing in reference to the criminal justice system as a whole. The next article is named, next slide.
Sorry, I'm trying to get onto the next one, but it has a bit of a delay.
All good.
Cool.
Yeah, this next article is called "The Truth About Racism in the UK" by Jude Yawson, and he is the author of Stormzy's book, Rise Up. His main points were the lack of acknowledgement of Black and Asian history by white British people, and also about the media's involvement of perpetuating racism. And he gives an example of the discussions of race are often dismissed on platforms such as Good Morning Britain, Sky, and Question Time. And then he urges that the experiences of Black, Asian, and other minority ethnic groups to be recognized alongside the concept of Britishness. And then here are a few of the political events that took place resulting these cases. So the Race Relation Act of 2000 was influenced by the backlash of Stephen Lawrence, who was murdered in a racially motivated attack in 1993. The act extended the 1976 Act, which is outlawing race discrimination in functions that weren't previously covered. So it put a duty on authorities to work towards eradicating discrimination and promoting racial equality. The act made chief officers of police liable for acts of racial discrimination, and it was, although it did hold them liable. It was repealed in 2010, I believe, for to be replaced by the Equality Act. And that act requires public bodies to, this is on the next slide though. This act required public bodies to disclose or proportionate information to show compliance with the act, just basically show that they're kind of hiring or they're representative of the population as a whole. And one of their big aims was for big businesses and other bodies to meet these demographic targets. There are few shortcomings that they weren't able to acknowledge. One being the public sector duty in socioeconomic inequalities and discrimination and intersectionality, which is like a bigger hindrance to like the Black community because they're not kind of taking the intersectionality into account. And then the next one is the Joint Committee on Human Rights. And this was a committee that was tasked with reviewing racism in policing and criminal justice in the UK, mainly addressing 3 areas. It was that the BAME community was being policed at higher rates. So Asians were 2 times as likely for being stopped and searched as their white counterparts, and Black people were 6 times as likely to be stopped. Another main issue was the death in custody, which highlighted not only death, but violence within police custody, which we saw in the examples as well, and their rate of detention without trial, which also damages the race relations within the country. They stressed that the correct implementation of each report would prove effective, and they advised for extra police training to ensure cultural awareness and promote diversity. So basically their end goal was to kind of give more training, which I don't think necessarily has led to bigger change, but that's kind of the conclusion they came to. And then the Lammy review is on the next slide. And this is in 2017, so a bit more recent. So it was another report done, but this one was a focus on the disproportionality of Black people in every level of the criminal justice system. So it says that more BAME people pled not guilty than white people, but there's a lack of trust in the system, which leads to more punitive sentences if found guilty. A good kind of example of this is the Khalif Browder story. If you haven't checked that out, it's really informative. And then he also mentions that there's issues in the data kind of not being coherent enough to influence reform. So a bunch of the data that they do have doesn't really, it's not very descriptive, so they can't make conclusions that would then influence policy. And then in his report, he also talked about how the youth were affected. So saying Black boys were 10 times more likely to get arrested for drugs than white kids. And the reoffending rate for Black boys was 7% higher than the rest of the youth population, which I think was 45%. Yeah, so the reoffending rate for Black boys was 45%. And then he mentioned how there was community issues in terms of issues in centralizing the courts across the country, which leading to the judicial outcomes being detached from the locality. So more of just like uniform judicial systems opposed to like each individual area kind of like setting their own rules. And then that could like lead to disproportionate arrest and convictions that wouldn't necessarily be just in other areas. So he said this would be a better system. A better system may be like the Crown Prosecution Service and the jury service. There are some recommendations to improve the system, such as improving transparency, deferred prosecution, and diversifying staff at all levels of the system. And then these are just some inquiries that went on within racism in the police systems. So the Hampshire Police Racism Inquiry was a 17-month-long investigation that suspected 17 officers and 4 other police staff of making racist and homophobic comments. There were recordings of some of the inappropriate conversations. but led to charges of gross misconduct for 9 of the individuals that were involved. There were criticisms from this whole investigation on the transparency, as it took a year after all of this has occurred for it to be released to the public. And they refused to release the names of the officers that were involved. And then whenever they were asked about more information about the case, they claimed that it would cost too much money to release the information. An anti-racist charity named the Monitoring Group made a point to call out the police for their lack of transparency and described how this culture of keeping it within the force is very dangerous to people of color. Mostly because, like, if you were to cross this officer again, you not knowing that they're involved in these racist acts kind of puts you at risk. And it's all in protecting these racist cops that a lot of them still kept their jobs. But people, the public, weren't privy to the information. And those are my thanks.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Gabe. That was amazing. Well, I mean, amazingly well read. Okay, Sonia, I think, is going to present the next bit.
Okay, so I'll just go into a little bit the rules regarding stop and search. So an officer can only search you if they believe you're either carrying an illegal weapon or the item that you are carrying could be used to commit a crime. This does mean, however, that the process of being selected for stop and search is open to the racial biases possessed by each individual officer. Refusing to stop and answer questions from the police doesn't actually warrant you being arrested or being searched. And a police officer must tell you their name, their police station, what they suspect you of carrying, why they are legally allowed to search you, and that you can have a record of the search and how you can get a copy of the search before they actually search you. Yeah, that's pretty much what I summarized from this slide. There's more facts and statistics on the slide if you want to take a look. Okay. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, launched the London Needs You Alive campaign after the surge in knife crime in 2018. The plan of action was to target lawbreakers, support victims, and work with young people. More money has also been invested in increasing the amount of patrols and trying to keep the number of police on the streets as high as possible. In theory, this is a good idea. However, research suggests that increasing patrols would only increase the numbers of stop and search has not actually been proven to deter crime. Yes, Home Secretary Priti Patel has claimed that stop and search works, and more recently tried to silence Florence Eshalomi. This is just my extra notes to give background into it. The Black MP who spoke in Parliament recently, telling her experience as a Black woman, and also just speaking on the Black Lives Matter marches. For me, this highlights the need for non-Black people of colour to rally in the movement, because when Black people initiated the movement for civil rights in the 60s, it benefited all people of colour in the country. And just in general, this is also false because, like I said, research has shown that stop and search isn't actually an effective tactic to reducing crime, and perhaps a more holistic approach would be better suited. 2 organisations have been listed on the slide. Stopwatch is an organisation which works to promote alternative practices which are fairer, and Why Stop equips you with the skills to interact with the police. I just noted down that last one is similar to Colin Kaepernick's Know Your Rights campaign, which he established to educate young Black Americans with their rights, so that when they do come into contact with the police, they know legally what they're allowed to do and what the police officers are allowed to do. Yeah, next slide. Is it on the next slide? Yeah. Northamptonshire Police now scrutinises the grounds for every single stop and search. The scrutiny is undertaken by a police officer, a sergeant, and members of the police. Members of the public, sorry. Although this is a good idea in theory, this still leaves the results of the scrutiny up to the individual biases of the people who are reviewing it. And this is also going to be an issue in certain regions around the country where the racial demographics are quite outnumbered. So, for instance, in areas like Birmingham, there's a high BME population, but in certain areas around the country where blacks and non-black people of colour are outnumbered, it means that when things are up for scrutiny, it might not go in their favour due to racial biases. Yes, increased focus on training is also a good start, but more investment is needed in community outreach programmes and social welfare. Okay, that's it for stop and search. So for strategies on campaigning, mock tribunals have been quite useful, but they might be quite hard for us to put together because you have to first get people who specialise, who have expertise in the certain topic. And I'm just going to throw out certain questions that might be good for any members or future members. It would be good for any members who have access or links to media outlets to possibly help in creating strategies for how to promote ourselves on radio or TV, and also people who have any knowledge with sociology or psychology. Might be useful to have you guys help us find a way to use data that people give us for contacting them with media alerts and texts or emails. If anybody has any legal backgrounds, to help come up with a strategy for lobbying reforms, or to for us to help join in any existing campaigns. Yeah, okay. And boycotting is one of the most effective tools for campaigning for social justice, especially in a capitalist white supremacist system, because affecting the bottom dollar is what companies care about most. There's strength in collective action, especially if you can get a large section of the population to join in. The bus boycotts of the 60s highlighted this, and I also noted down the anti-apartheid movement, which helped to end the apartheid regime in South Africa. There are two types of boycotts: primary, which involves not buying goods from a company that you don't agree with the policies of, and secondary, which involves not purchasing from a company which sells products from a company that you don't agree with. The effects of boycotting are negative publicity, a loss in profit, and ultimately policy change. Boycotts tend to be quite effective because, like I said previously, companies care mostly about making money, so it benefits them to have a good reputation and to be on the public side. They usually garner quite a lot of attention, especially if they're wide scale. And a nationwide survey in 1991 found that businesses actually believed boycotts were a lot more effective than lobbying and class action lawsuits. I would assume that was probably because the amount of money that could be lost from publicly boycotting would far outweigh what you might have to pay in a class action lawsuit. And most importantly, providing an alternative is key when boycotting. For instance, boycotting a company that you don't agree with for racism and then highlighting alternative Black-owned business or POC-owned businesses or Black art, which we've seen lately with Reni Edo becoming, I believe, the first British Black author to top the UK book charts, and yeah, that sort of thing. That's all the notes that I have. Sorry if it was really long.
No, that was perfect. Thank you. I think we just have 2 more slides now. That I think Jazz is Jazz. Are you still there? She was going to present these, I think.
Yeah. No. Can you hear me? Is it all good?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Okay. So just quickly, call to action as a campaign tactic. A call to action is a statement that encourages a viewer to perform a specific action. They're quick, easy, and effective, which allows people that want to help but might not have the time or the ability to get fully committed to be able to still participate in a campaign. You might have seen this in this sort of thing that we've got down here. So text a fiver, text a message, text some love, which sort of encourages immediate participation, which is something that I think could be really important for us. A lot of charities use these sort of tactics to sort of get donations from people by just texting a simple word. This example that we've got on the screen actually raised £1 million between the 9th of March and April the 20th. So it's obviously really impressive. And I think it's the whole sort of instant gratification thing we've got as well. People like to be able to do something and people like to be able to get involved, even if it is just texting and donating a fiver. It's a really quick and easy way to get people to sort of engage with us as a collective. Various examples of how we could use CTAs. We could do something where we scanned a QR code to link to a petition. We could do the classic text to donate. We could do a swipe up or a QR code to a pre-written email that would open your phone. We could use it to sign up to a mail list or to recruit new people into the collective. We can promote this through various ideas such as posters, social media stories, social media ads like we've been doing already, or we could email them either. Sort of key rules in writing these CTAs that we would have to use, sort of make it short, snappy, make it something that people are gonna it's gonna stick in your mind and you're gonna remember. And make the statements bold and try and make them evoke emotion in people so they actually feel that desire to donate to you or to help your cause in some way. Sorry, can I have the next slide, please?
Yeah, coming up. Sorry, there's a bit of a delay with me like clicking the next slide thing. There we go.
It's all right. So, oh, that doesn't have the top bit in it. That's right. Okay. So next I'm going to talk about qualitative data. So qualitative data is the non-numerical, descriptive, unstructured type of data that sort of comes from the point of view of participants. I think it's something that AIR want to really focus on and want to use to sort of bring more of a human perspective to our work. Because it does sort of foster more empathy and more awareness, I think, than just using quantitative data. Key examples that you can think of are the Diary of Anne Frank, which obviously became very famous, although it is like a personal account, it does resonate with a lot of people. And also, if you've been sort of listening to podcasts or looking at things on Instagram or anything like that, you've also been consuming quantitative data. So in terms of the way that we could use that, it's wide ranging and sort of a lot of creative methods we could use, like one-on-one interviews, diary entries, field notes, focus groups, or visual or audio resources, for example, oral histories, and the significance that has in campaigning and influencing policy. The first thing is universality in specificity, which is sort of what I said before. People do relate to personal experiences a lot more than you think sometimes, and even if you think that they're sort of deeply personal to you, if it does resonate with someone else, it does sort of create that personal connection with them that might encourage them to get involved in some way with our campaigns. Storytelling is also fundamental to humanity and society, and it makes hidden lives and experiences visible. We might find something unexpected, and it is also hard to know what will tip the scale. So with quantitative data, you don't know sort of what post you might make or what media you might put out there that might change someone's mind or encourage them to sort of join your cause, encourage an MP to join your cause, encourage someone to help you sort of develop some policy. To put that sort of more into context, if we look at the quantitative versus qualitative data that we've got on the Grenfell tragedy, so sort of on the left-hand side, we've got the quantitative data, which is that 72 people died in the fire, more than 70 others were injured, and at least 1,500 adults and children received mental health treatment in the aftermath of the fire. But if you look at it from more of a sort of qualitative perspective, which is what the links are on the side, we're not going to watch these videos, but I'll just sort of explain it. There's really sort of specific, heartfelt details in these videos that about sort of tributes to those who have lost their lives from family members. And, you know, one of the quotes that came from it was, "How can one make sense of losing 6 family members at the same time? It makes me lose my trust in humanity." Those sort of quotes and that sort of personal sort of effect that you get from qualitative data, it resonates deeply with people and is definitely contributed to greater empathy and awareness around the cause, especially with the Grenfell tragedy. So I think that is really important that we use this sort of data in our campaigns going forward, to sort of get people to sort of feel all of these feelings. In terms of ethics, obviously we'll make sure that people can change their mind at any point about being involved in our campaigns. We're going to make sure we've got informed consent and anonymity if that's what people want. And in terms of co-production, people are going to be allowed to contribute to the direction of the data that we collect and the way that it's used in our campaigns.
Cool. Thanks so much, Jazz. Okay, that's pretty much the end of this presentation. There's just to let you guys know, there's a section at the end of this PowerPoint which is about key organisations working in the field of like racism in law enforcement. We, as I'm sure you guys know, we're kind of like running out of time, so we yeah, we're not going to go over these now, but it's going to be in the PowerPoint, which I'll put a link to this PowerPoint in the chat, in the Zoom chat, but also, as I say, it will be on our Instagram bio for a little bit until we come up with we're hopefully going to have a little bit of a website which we can post these resources on as well, and we can try and make this PowerPoint into something like a bit more of like a structured report. But anyway, just in case you guys wanted to have a look in your spare time, there are some slides here about different organizations which are working against racism in the police, and yeah, it's actually really interesting. And thank you again to all of the people who have put all of these slides together. A lot of you are here right now watching them, and it's, I think, like, yeah, this PowerPoint has been like a kind of beautifully eclectic mix of like lots and lots of information and research which loads of people have put together in one PowerPoint. And I think that hopefully, well, I found it really informative, so I hope that it's been informative for everyone else, and that we can use this collection of data to kind of, yeah, moving forward, to help come up with some ideas for change. I'll stop sharing my screen now, if I can figure out how. Oh yeah, stop share, and I'll just hand over to Kane to just wrap things up.
Yeah, so everyone should be able to find a link in the chat. Can everyone see it? Are people seeing that?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So your feedback is kind of really appreciated, especially as this is the kind of one of the first events, and obviously future events will be much more interactive and we'll have more discussion. But really, I hope that we conveyed the kind of urgency of what we're doing. I mean, and I think that we should thank the presenters for doing so so eloquently, especially with such hard and difficult, of course, difficult subject matter. Yeah, this is incredibly urgent. So any feedback is appreciated. Of course, you can tell us about how late we have been and how we ruined your evenings. But yeah, I think unless we have anything else to say, I think that we've done our job here. We've conveyed to you what we are doing and what you've all done, what you've produced, and you know how important this is. You know, regardless of what Kemi Badenoch and Priti Patel say, this is the reality. We are dealing with white supremacy and head on. So yeah, please give us your feedback. Your presence is welcomed and cherished and appreciated by everyone. So thank you. Ella, do you have anything else to say before we go?
Not really, just to reiterate, yeah, that document slide, the documents link that Kane's posted in the chat, that's where you can put your feedback. I know we had a form last time, but it's just, you don't have to pay to do Google Documents, whereas you do for forms. So yeah, we'll just use that. So if you have anything that you want to contribute, please do. And then yeah, for the next meeting, so hopefully we'll see most of you guys in 2 weeks time. So we're going to be doing these events like every other Thursday. So the next event, we've got some like really exciting guest speakers lined up, which we'll make some more announcements about in the coming week or so. But yeah, that'll be really cool. And
so, sorry, just quickly, keep sharing the social media stuff. I think we are on Twitter now officially. So follow us on Twitter. Please share any posts that we do, especially if you find it interesting and informative. And yeah, just keep up the energy because we've done well so far.
Yeah, I think like, yeah, and just thanks for everyone coming. And like, I know there's 44 people now. I think at the prime of this meeting there was about 47. So I think actually, like, considering that we as a group only formed a couple of weeks ago, it's amazing that you are like 47 people have had their like commitment to like want to come to this meeting. And I think like between 47 people there's so much reach, like the power of people and collective action is so yeah, is so strong. And hopefully yeah, thanks for like everyone for being patient with this process in terms of we're still yeah, kind of trying to organize ourselves and things like that, but yeah, that's it. If anyone wants to have a chat like after, we'll just be here lurking, but if not, then please, yeah, enjoy your evenings and sorry for running over time. Thank you again so much to Sonia, Gabe and Jazz for your presentations, and Kane and Ellis and everyone else in the Angry Mob, and Ella obviously, and everyone for your slides and everything. Yeah, it's been really informative night.
Thank you everyone, it's been really good, and thank you for putting it all together so quickly. Yeah, it's all really important, so well done.
Cool. Okay, bye. Thanks. Bye. Bye. Don't because I want to see the I'm like was that rude when I was just like bye? We're not on meeting. No, it wasn't.
Oh my god, I started sweating in this jumper.
Did I miss anyone out then when I was saying thank you to people who presented? I don't know. Sorry, no, I don't think you missed anyone out. I guess I can stop recording now. Is it even still? Is it recording? Oh yeah, it is recording.
Yeah.
You have been recording.
Okay. Stop recording. Yes, you will receive an email.
That was really great.